Okay, so I don't know about you guys, but I really enjoy a good underdog story. You know, with the stories where the hero is facing great odds, but somehow by the end they overcome. You know, whether it's a sports movie where the losing team has a miraculous comeback and win, or it's, an action movie where this hero saves usually the damsel in distress and is victorious, overcomes great odds to win. But I do enjoy those movies, those stories. But at times I think, how embarrassing is it for the other person to lose? I mean, this little underdog comes up and beats you. It seems embarrassing. Let me give you a few examples. I'm going to look at a kids movie that came out many years ago, but it's a great example of this. The movie Air Bud. If you're not familiar with it, it's a movie where this basketball team is not very good, so they get some help in a very unlikely place, a dog. The dog joins the basketball team, and they overcome and they win the championship. But now imagine for a minute if you're on the opposing team. I mean, you've worked hard all year, you've practiced, you've come together as a team, you've overcome challenges, and you make it to the championship game and then lose to a team with a dog. I mean, how embarrassing is that? I can imagine them leaving court with their heads hung in shame. Or how about the classic story of Cinderella? Where this common peasant, with the help of a fairy godmother, marries the prince. Now imagine you're a princess of another kingdom who's been drooling over that prince for a while. And you really wanted that prince. And then this commoner comes out of nowhere who needs help from a fairy godmother to steal your man away. How embarrassing is it to lose your prince to a commoner? I mean, I would think it'd be embarrassing and a little shameful for those other princesses. Or, we go a bit more modern and old at the same time. One of my favorite movies, Lord of the Rings. I'm sure most of you haven't seen it, you know enough about it. We got Sauron, this great, powerful being, has the largest, most powerful army in the world, yet can't stop a little hobbit from destroying a ring. And the ring's even going against him too. The hobbit's everything against him, and yet he overcomes and defeats the most powerful army there is. How embarrassing for him to lose to a little tiny hobbit. These are sources of embarrassment and even shame in some cases. But one thing that should never cause us embarrassment or shame, and that is our relationship with Jesus. How was that for a transition? Did it go well? I feel it was a little forced, but I thought it was okay. So that's why today we are going to be looking at the song Unashamed. As I continue on my sermon series, Summer of Music, we look at various songs. So today we're doing a song that's actually out on the radio now, so I know many of you don't know it very well, so by the end of today you're going to know it fairly well. But first, I'm going to go over a little background of the song, which is not a whole lot to it because it's, new. It's a fairly straightforward song about, not being ashamed. It is based off of Romans chapter 1, verse 16. It's a fairly common song for me growing up, I learned, but let's read it real quick. Romans chapter 1, verse 16. For I am not ashamed of the gospel, because it is the power of God that brings salvation to everyone who believes, first for the Jews, then to the Gentiles. So it's a very straightforward verse. He is not ashamed of the gospel, because it is the power of salvation. So he's not ashamed of it. Of course, Paul was writing this letter to the Romans, people he actually didn't know yet, but he's planning a trip to them to go and encourage them. So he's telling them, I'm coming, I'm going to bring the gospel, I'm not ashamed of it, it's going to be good. So that is the scripture basis for it. So I wanted to find some more background on the song. So I looked up the definition of unashamed. So I did a quick Google search, look for a definition of unashamed. So this is one definition I found up here on the screen. So to be unashamed means to be without guilt, self-consciousness, or doubt. So put it simply, it's just an emotion. in an emotion of not feeling ashamed over whatever. So we're going to play the song here in just a moment. And as you listen to the song, and you can follow along in the bulletin, there's my outline on the back, there's the lyrics to the song. You can follow along with the lyrics, so if you don't know it, it can help you learn it. So listen to it, look at their lyrics, and see if that definition of unashamed is a definition Matthew West, who wrote the song, by the way, and we'll be singing it, if that's the definition Matthew West used when he was writing the song and thinking of what it meant to be unashamed. So let's go ahead and let's listen to the song. That is a good song. I really enjoy this song. And this week, as I was picking a song that was heard on the radio, I want to do a modern song that's on the radio. I picked this song largely because my wife spent about 3 weeks going around the house singing this song almost nonstop. So it's been stuck in my head. So that is one of the reasons why we are doing this song this week. If you like it, you can thank her. If you don't like it, blame me. I made bad choices. Not in her. That's definitely not. No. Anyways, I am getting off track now. So anyways, that is the song Unashamed by Matthew West. It's a very encouraging, uplifting song that, I think is an awesome song. But before we listen to it, I asked you to think of a question. Was that definition of unashamed the one Matthew West used? That definition was just about a feeling, an emotion. You don't feel ashamed of the gospel. So let's look at this song and see if that seems like the definition he is using. Let's look how the song starts. The very first couple lines of the song. It says, 3 brothers in a fire, willing to die for their faith. This is a Bible story. It's from the Old Testament, from the book of Daniel. Now, honestly, it's one of my favorite Bible stories, too. It's another reason why I picked the song. Because he's talking about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. And he's using them as an example of what it means to be unashamed. Because if you remember the story, the king had set up this golden statue. And he told everybody, let's bow down and worship the statue. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego knew that's wrong. That's a sin. So they refused to sin. They refused to bow down to the statue. So they were thrown into the fire. Of course, God saved them. And, the king realized he was bad. But anyways, that's a whole nother sermon. So Matthew West, looking for an example of being unashamed, he looked at people that stood up to the king, refused to sin. So they were thrown in the fire because they refused to sin. That was an example of unashamed. It wasn't a feeling. It was actually an action of actually not doing something, of not bowing down to the statue. It was what they did, not just they felt. The next example he gave, in the next little paragraph here, it says, and Daniel met a lion because he chose to pray. Again, this is also from the book of Daniel in the Old Testament. More common story of Daniel in the lion's den. If you know that story, the king in that story said, no, you can't pray to anybody else but me, the king. You can only pray to me. So when Daniel heard this new law, he went to his room by himself and prayed to God. Of course, people were spying on it because they didn't like him, caught him praying to God, told the king, so he was thrown into the lion's den. And of course, God saved him, and he made it through that, and the king again realized he had done something wrong. So Daniel was in a lion's den because he refused to stop obeying God. So these are examples that Matthew West looked at to what it means to be unashamed. Obviously, him being unashamed of the gospel is not just a feeling. It's not like, yes, of course, I am not ashamed of the gospel. It's good. It gives me salvation. No. For Matthew West in this song, it's acting out. It's not just a feeling, it's actions. You have to act not ashamed. So I found a different definition of what it means to be unashamed. Because Google is good at that. You can find all kinds of definitions. You can find whatever definition you like, because, the English language is also odd like that. You can have multiple definitions for a single word. But this is a better example for unashamed that we will be using today. This definition is, to be unashamed is expressed or acting openly without guilt or embarrassment. So you are expressing something, whether in words or actions. And You are acting openly for other people to see. You're not hiding it away. You let other people see that you are not ashamed, that you are not ashamed of the gospel. You're not ashamed that you are a Christian. It's a different understanding of what it means to be unashamed, because it requires acting and action. But this definition of being unashamed comes with a lot more costs than the first one. Because you can feel whatever you want, and it's fine. Nobody has to know what you feel. But when you actually act unashamed, there are costs that come with it. I mean, you can look at Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and see the costs they had to pay. Thankfully in this country, we don't worry about being, thrown into a lion's den or into a furnace. More than likely, if we are unashamed of the gospel and we show that through our actions, it's not going to cost us our life. But it can cost us other things. It can cost us embarrassment. Because sometimes people find out you're a Christian, then you can be teased, you can be mocked, you can be put down. It may not go well. It can cause you to be embarrassed as you're trying to be unashamed. It's a complex set of emotions. Sometimes it can even be a loss of relationships. Because if you stand up for what you believe in, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you refuse to sin, people may not want you around so much because they want to go off and enjoy their sins and do these things you won't do. So maybe they won't want you around so much. So being unashamed of the gospel, it can cost you relationships. And also, this another set of complex emotions. When you're unashamed, when you're acting out your faith, it can draw attention to yourself that you may not want. Because, Shadrach and Meshach may not want that attention. Daniel may not want that attention. As people, we usually like attention, but for things we want. But sometimes, being a Christian and being unashamed of it, you act differently than other people. You don't talk like they do. You don't treat others like they do. You don't engage in the same activities as they do. You have different priorities and values than they do. So you can draw attention for things you may not want from other people. But honestly, what I think the biggest, scariest cost of being unashamed of the gospel is, people may use you as an example of what it means to be a Christian. Think about it. If you are unashamed, you are proud and loud, you let everybody know that you are a Christian. You stand up for what is right. You will obey God no matter what. People can look at you as an example of what it means to be a Christian, because they may not have any other unashamed Christians in their lives. So you can be the person that they use as a measure tool for what it is to be a Christian, and whether they would want to be a Christian or not by looking at you in your life. So being unashamed and acting it out, it comes with costs. At least according to Matthew West and his song. So let's see if the Bible agrees with Matthew West. If this is what it means to be unashamed, and if these costs could come with it. So let's start with Jesus and what he says. We're going to go to Matthew chapter 10, verses 32 and 33. Let's see what Jesus says about being ashamed or unashamed of the gospel. Matthew chapter 10, 32 and 33. It says, again, these are the words of Jesus here. Whoever acknowledges me before others, I will also acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But whoever disowns me before others, I will disown before my Father in heaven. It seems like Jesus is even placing a higher priority on being unashamed than even Matthew West did in the song. Because look at this. Whoever acknowledges me before others, I will acknowledge them before my Father. So if we don't acknowledge Jesus to others around us, we don't let them know that we follow Jesus, that he's important to us, that he saved us. We don't acknowledge him to others. God won't acknowledge us. Jesus won't acknowledge us to God. Now think of the consequences of that. If Jesus has acknowledged us to God, that's horrible. Because, that is how we make it to heaven. So this is putting being unashamed as a salvational issue, it seems. Because if you are not unashamed, if you are not willing to let others know what you believe, it seems like Jesus here is saying us, he won't acknowledge us to God. which seems to make it very difficult for us to make it to heaven. So this is a very important, crucial issue of being unashamed. Matthew West even downplayed it a little bit in his song. So if we are ashamed of God, God will be ashamed of us. And again, it involves actions. Because he will either let us in or he won't. We will either acknowledge him to others or we won't. So, questions for you to think about. Do those around you, do they know you are a Christian? Are they aware you go to church? Is this common knowledge for others? And if they found out, would they be surprised? I hope those are easy questions for you. But also, are you willing to tell them about Jesus? Acknowledge him. An actual verbal thing where you let others know about him. Which leads us to our next verse. We're going to look at 1 Peter 3, verses 13 and 15. Because this is about us telling others about Jesus and the importance of it and how to do it. So 1 Peter, it's one of those very small books in the New Testament. It's hard to find if you're flipping, but it's there. 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 13 through 15. It says, "Who is going to harm you if you are eager to do good? But even if you should suffer for what is right, you are blessed. Do not fear their threats. Do not be frightened. But in your heart, revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect." Okay, there's two main points in this passage here. Let's look at the first one here. It starts off with what seems like a rhetorical question. Who is going to harm you if you are eager to do good? That seems like a simple question. Nobody would harm you if you're going to do good. That seems like a silly question, rhetorical. But then, if we go back to the song and the examples in the song, we think of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and Daniel. They were just trying to do good, and bad things happened to them. So it's not quite a rhetorical question. We can suffer for doing good, which is why he goes on. Because he also says, but if you should suffer for what is right, you are blessed. Yeah, we can do what's good, we can do what's right, and we can suffer for it. Bad things can happen to us. But if we do that, we are blessed by God. I mean, the all-powerful creator of the universe will bless you. Now, if we have a scale, one hand we see problems on earth for doing what's good, and the other side of the scale is being blessed by God. I would have to think this one far outweighs anything that could be on this scale. Which is why he goes on, tells you not to be afraid. Even if bad things do happen, you will be blessed. And blessings can come in all kinds of shapes and sizes and ways. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Daniel, they were saved from their problems. But we all know, we have seen people who are not saved from their problems. That means they get a blessing that will last in all eternity in heaven, which would be an even better blessing than a temporary blessing here on earth. Maybe we can get both blessings. It's kind of vague. But a blessing from God is of great value. So if we are unashamed, we stand up for God, we refuse to sin, we refuse to stop obeying God, and we suffer for that, God will bless us. Now that's some encouragement. But let's go on with what this verse says. This is one of my favorite passages here. It goes on saying, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope you have. First of all, I'm going to assume you all have hope in God. You all have hope in Jesus. You all have this hope and belief that he will save you from your sins. You are forgiven, and you have paradise waiting for you after you die. I hope that you have that hope. But Do you have reasons for that hope? If someone were to ask you, why do you have so much hope? Maybe you're with family at a funeral, and you don't seem to be as broken up as them. Because, you have hope, and you can share that hope. You see somebody going through hard times and suffering, and you can give them encouragement. You can give them this hope. But then they ask you, why? Why do you have this hope? How can you have hope in the face of the suffering and tragedy and these bad things going on? How can you have this hope? What answers would you give them? What answers do you have personally? I could give you all kinds of reasons. I would love to do that. That may be a whole nother sermon series, whatever. But what are your personal reasons? In the outline of the bulletin, there's a place for you to write those down. Because it's important to think about. Because it says we need to be prepared to give an answer. So you need to think about it. What reasons do you have? If you have a hard time coming with reasons, please tell me. See me. I would love to share reasons. I studied this a lot. This gets into the realm of apologetics, which is a big fancy word I like to say to make myself sound smart and intelligent. But I took a lot of classes on apologetics in college, and all that means is basically this: you don't give a logical reason for why you believe. So if you're struggling with coming up with reasons, please see me. I would love to share some ideas and thoughts with you. But the best reasons you have are personal. Maybe it's a life experience you have, something you've been through that God was with you. Some miracle you saw in your life or someone's life. These personal reasons are better than the logical reasons I may have. So be prepared. Have reasons. That helps you through the hard times. Something to hang on to when you go through struggles, you go through problems. You have your own reasons. And it can help others when they're going through the hard times if you can give them reasons why they should have hope. We need to be prepared to give reasons. So, going back to the song, Matthew asks as a question more of himself, but it's a question we should ask of ourselves too. As we're thinking about being unashamed, as we're thinking about standing up for God, refusing to sin, refusing to not obey God, we think about the problems that may cause in our lives. There's a question he asked of himself that we should ask of ourselves too. The thing he said was, so what's going to be said of me when it's all said and done? Will I stand for my beliefs, or will I turn around and run? That's a real question. That's a real problem we all have to face. Because, we will have trials and struggles in our lives, especially if we are unashamed of the gospel. So you need to make a commitment right now. Because if you wait until the moment the trials happen, if you don't make a commitment beforehand, when those trials come, it's hard to make the right choice. Because you're blinded by the struggles and the pain and the problem. You need to make that commitment now, before there's problems. A commitment that you will be unashamed. You will stand up for God. You will obey God no matter what problems or what struggles come. You make that decision now. And then you reaffirm that decision every single day. Because you have to prepare yourself to be unashamed, to stand up for Him, to let others know about the hope you have. You need to be prepared and have that question answered and that firm commitment. But quite often us Christians, we tend to act like we are the underdogs. Back at the beginning I talked about underdogs. Quite often we act like Christians are the underdogs. We are in a losing fight. But you know what? That is so not true. The Bible is clear. Jesus has already won the victory. He has conquered sin and death. Jesus is victorious. And there is no power anywhere that can come close to the power of God. There is no underdog that could possibly overtake God. We act like we're the underdog, so we're scared and we hide. But no, we are the victorious ones. We are the ones that are conquering sin and death. We are the ones that have paradise waiting for us. We should not be ashamed because we are no underdog, because we have the power of God behind us. So as I am beginning to wrap this up, I want to go through a quote Matthew West said about his own song, about what being unashamed meant to him. And I think it's a good encouragement for us as we're thinking about what this could mean to us in our lives. So here's what Matthew West said. It should be up here on the screen, yes. Being unashamed about my faith really comes down to being excited to share with the world what God has done in my life. I know what he has rescued me from. I know how I'd be lost without him. It's from that place of gratitude that I find a desire to tell everyone who can hear me about Jesus' love for you. That's being unashamed. We're so appreciative and excited about what Jesus has done. It sure makes us excited and want to share about him, want to be unashamed, want to let others know how great our God is. We should be unashamed. Even if it may cost us, even if it may be scary, we should be excited to do it anyways, because we already have the victory. We have God on our side. But it's for us, each individual, to decide for ourselves. Are we going to be unashamed? Are we going to stand up for God? Are we going to avoid those sins? Are we going to be constantly obedient to God no matter what? Normally, I end my sermons with one point I want you to remember. I'm going to tweak that slightly today. I'm going to end with a prayer, or more likely a promise I hope all of us can make to God. And again, I'm stealing this from the song. So this is what I want you to pray to God. Promise I would like you all to make to God. Here it says, again, quoting from the song, Lord, I will stand for you. I will tell the world about you. That should be our promise to God. We will stand for him. We will tell the world about him. We will be unashamed. That should be who we are as Christians, as we are excited and appreciative of all God has done for us. Well, now it is time for us to stand and praise God for what he has done for us, to get encouragement and to show him love. We do this now here, but then we go out into the world and we praise him through all that we do. We show the world that we are not ashamed of him.